So why should you watch this video? Because e-commerce fashion is one of the areas that photography is still doing really interesting things, and there's also a potential to earn good money. It's easy to dismiss it, but if it's good enough for Steven Meisel to still be shooting Zara, then it's a good learning point. This content popped up on Bershka's TikTok the other day. They had some really nice behind the scenes, and actually the images are great. And I think there's some really good lessons here for photographers, really great skills that you can learn, especially combining strobe light and constant lighting, how to work with a big wide open set, how to understand a lighting setup the video can come in and use as well, and work in a way that's planned and not super disruptive. E-commerce fashion needs content all of the time. It's a great area to learn in. I've got 6 different setups, all in the same lighting stage, with different variations and bits of advice and technique along the way. So although this is not a big named photographer, it's a big brand that's doing interesting content. So hopefully it's useful to everyone. Thanks for watching as always. Let's get into it. So let's have a look at the studio space. There's a few key things that I really need to point out. And I'll bring some images from the TikTok story in as well. So you've got a big lighting rig over the top. Got a breezer here. I'll explain that in a minute. We've got some beauty dishes, umbrellas, some umbrellas at the back, potentially octas. There's some hard lighting at the back. You've got this soft backdrop, which is painted or photo printed, and some other interesting bits and pieces. So some more beauty dishes, magnums, big diffusion. In this one, you can see someone holding up a light. Looks like a light with a grid on, could potentially be like a hard box. I don't think it is in this version, but it could be. They're also doing a mix of film and video. And just another shot here which shows the video setup. The breezer is a really important light. A lot of photographers, if they've worked with a breezer, will tell you it's one of the most beautiful lights you can get in the industry. Normally used as a constant lighting. You can put a strobe head in there as well. It has a zoom function, so you can move it in and out. It's kind of got a center light to it. Super nice beauty style lighting. The interior is really reflective. I don't have that in the satellite, so I'm going to work with something similar. And here we've got a bunch of like sky panels, which is similar also to the Aperture Nova. Slightly different setup, but just a flat panel, soft lighting. Let's see how that reflects in the satellite. Start from above. I've got 2 rows of sky panels. I've got that in just so I don't have to keep rebuilding. This is our like base layer. We're not using everything, but it gives you an idea of what you could do. So obviously these sky panels, you can move them backwards, forwards, because you've got a lighting rig in the setup in the studio. They're like 3.70 meters, probably be a bit lower in reality. In place of the breezer, I've got an Aperture 1200 with a light dome. It's a different light, but in a way that you're not going to notice really unless you've worked with breezer a lot. So it's a constant lighting with a kind of big silver umbrella on the side, so you get all those specular highlights. I've put one of these on the other side just because it's handy to have that. I've got my photo umbrella, beauty dish, and then a reflector with a grid on it. I've built my stage, and then over the back, I've got some Arris. Doesn't matter too much what size this is. We're just going to punch in with a hard Arri light at the back. Mirrored on the other side. Same one here. I've got some umbrellas in white and silver. So that's a great starting point. And then our post models, we're going to move around. We're going to make these 6 variants. Camera setting here. I've got ISO 400. It's not going to have a huge mismatch between the video and the stills. I changed it a couple of times. So I think one setup I've got 200. And this video is about understanding how you would work in this environment. We're not trying to replicate exactly these shots. And in the preview image, I think I've got pretty much everything on. I'm mixing like strobe and constant lighting. This is not a final picture. This is to show you roughly what it looks like. And then I've done the same thing here where I've turned off all of the background lights. So we look at it from above. This is the front row of lights that are working right now. Everything else is switched off. Let's compare those side by side just so you can really see how we're lighting that background and then how we're lighting the foreground. I'm going to try and keep it as simple as that. The other thing I thought was kind of fun, so I'll show you this as well. I couldn't get the texture of the sand. If you're using satellite, and this is just a handy like tip, I imported this sand texture. I think it's from Megascans. It's like Unreal Engine, basically. Works in principle for this. I'm not able to kind of warp it, so I can't get some of the things we see in the background of the other shots where it's almost like a sand dune. I did experiment, though, with something else, which I think is kind of fun, and you could definitely do something like this. And let me know, maybe there's a better way of doing this also. There's an option in the props that if you're shooting food, you can use bread. So I took a load of the round breads and just flipped them upside down. Let me just return it so you can see what it's like. That's a big loaf of bread. But actually, when you flip it the other way, it kind of looks like sand. Got that interesting texture. And actually, if you look at it in the preview image, it kind of looks like rocky sand. But I thought it would make everyone laugh too much if I did the whole thing and you could see that she was stood on bread rolls. So I have abandoned that and just used my Unreal Engine sand base, which kind of works. But as you can see, it's much more flat. So where should we start with this? Let's pull in our mood board, but fortunately our mood board here is the final images. When I'm working with satellite, I like to keep my mood board like visible so I know I'm getting roughly where I need to. And I think we're going to start with this image here because it has a little bit of everything, has light in the background, light on the model. I can't do the sense of movement, the wind machine and so on. And for ease of reference, so taking out the things that I'm not using that were in the original setup. So obviously the sky panels are gone here, bunch of beauty dishes and things that I've removed. And we're going to keep this one quite basic. What I like about this Bershka setup is that it goes from like day to night. It has a mixture of like hard flash, really intense backgrounds, and then using the sand. So there's a lot that we can learn. There's a lot of coverage here. And if you were to kind of walk onto set like this or start planning a shoot like this, then you kind of know what you want to achieve. And it doesn't seem like a totally alien concept. So let's start with what we've got at the background. All I've got is some of these sky panels here. It doesn't matter like what sky panel you have really, or whether you have the aperture novas. We want to have some light that's pushing onto the background. So if we'll check in a preview image, I'll just make one of these a solo light. See over here, it's just pushing this light up into the backdrop and just lighting up the sunset for us. Bring the reference image back in. It's this kind of thing that we're trying to achieve. Obviously, I don't have the same backdrop, so all these things are going to be a little bit different, but the basics of it should be easy to follow. Then I've got my big area lights here. I'll put this on a solo. I'm just kind of accenting this background. Depending on what your background is made of, or printed, or painted, you can use like a harder soft light as long as it's not super glossy and bouncing back off the backdrop. In the preview image, you can see that I've got the silhouette of the model, so no light is like bleeding back onto the model. That's all fine. Everything is great. I've got barn doors on here. If I took the barn doors off, see that huge spread of light? It doesn't look terrible, but it's controllable with the barn doors on, so let's put them back on. And then I've got a similar thing on the other side. Let's put this as a solo light. And I'm just raking this light across the background. Three things together, the two sides and then the middle light should do what we need to for our backdrop. And then with these sky panels, I've just got them hitting onto the backdrop just to give it a little pickup. If I put it on as a solo, you can just see it kind of creeping down here. It's the middle one on a solo. So you're getting maybe like a third of a stop of exposure onto the backdrop. So you're just picking it up. When they're all on together, it just evens out that background. You see that background looks nice and smooth and clear for us. So we want to get a little bit of a silhouette feel to these prop plants here. So I'm not putting a lot of light onto them from the front. I'm mainly lighting the background. I've got my polyboards. They're really just flagging off any stray light. I'm not having light that's creeping out of the background and hitting the model. Let's go to the front of the frames. I've got ISO 200 f11. The reference image is quite like flash lit. It's punching in from the front. So this ISO is fine for us. So this is my constant light. Got a filter on here. So I've got a full CT orange, so a warming gel essentially. Put it as a solo. And it's just adding like shape and texture to the body. Because I don't have a diffusion panel over the front, big gold feel. The gold is coming obviously from the warming gel, but it's silver inside the lantern. So it's putting those kind of specular highlights on the legs that we'd expect from a non-diffused light. Oh, and it's on 28, so it's on like a third power. Then on the other side, I've got like 2/3 power, so 60% versus 30%. Put this on a solo light, that's punching in much more, giving us this kind of like hard shadow coming across from the nose. It's not super soft, obviously. Don't have a diffusion on it. It's quite a small light source. Also, the outfit is different on this one. In satellite, I can't put like swimwear and trousers together. So I've gone with the swimwear because it's more important to understand that in terms of like the white exposure to our reference image. So that's our constant lighting coming in. And then I'm pushing in with a flash head. So I've just got a standard strobe with a reflector on it, grid number 3. We know from everything we've seen before that grids kind of shut down that sphere of light. And we just follow the angle of that light. So we're above, obviously, we're shooting down towards the model's face. Because that grid is on it, we're hitting somewhere around the face and the chest area, and it's quite central. That grid isn't like diffused. It's going to give us a hard shadow under the neck, but we're going to even that out a bit by putting those constant lights back on. And that warming gel on here is a half CT orange. Remember, I had a full CT orange on the other side. And that just works with that like sunlight feel, works with the background, toning the image. And it's around half power. Now what I've done, so it's really easy to understand, I've separated this out into the full setup and then the foreground setup. So if we look at the foreground setup, this is just these 3 lights that are pushing in. We can compare those side by side. This is our kind of final shot, and this is our front shot only without the background light. At the background, you can see those sky panels that are kind of lifting up the sunset backdrop that we've got, giving us this nice light down here, and then this like gradient feel across the backdrop. This background is just far too dark. and we're solving the problem with that constant lighting. If I scroll down on the far right, you better see a bunch of lights that are used here. We've got all those like sky panels that are on 100%. We've got our background like clip lights. Then we've got our front constant lighting, and then we're just pushing in with that one flash. So that one flash is like cleaning everything out, and it's about getting that balance. So that's a good starting point. It gives us that real sunset feel. Next image, we're going to go for this one here. That's got that real feel where the sunset is just sort of disappearing. There's purpley blues in the sky. You notice that the background, it's almost blue on the sand dunes. So I'm going to overemphasize that to give you a feeling of how you could work with that. Let's just jump to the final image and I'll talk you through it. I've gone a little bit over the top just so that you can understand exactly what's being worked with here. So I've got like a little bit too much blue and pink onto the sand dune, but that's deliberate. I've also, if you notice, let's jump between the two. I've got two different backdrops here. So I just created my own backdrop and then imported that into Satellite using this option here with the picture template. So one of the big things if you're doing a large production like this is like planning what your shot list is and what your sequence is. But what I'm trying to do is keep my lighting in a similar kind of place so we know we're not rigging or moving lighting around constantly. So this light is pretty much in the same position as we had the first one, which mimics where that breezer is, so we get that consistent feel for the stills in the video. But instead of 30% power or a third, I've gone up to 2/3, 70% power. Let's put it as a solo. What I'm trying to do is just tie it into this like background. Got that like epic sunset feel. So I put a dark amber on here. If you're doing this yourself, you need to work out what's the color balance I want to use. Don't go too far with gels. Obviously, again, if this is a fashion shoot, you want some kind of realism to the clothing, but we're going to knock a lot of that color back out. It's not going to really change our image too much. And also with this one, I've just put a little internal diffusion on here. I don't want a huge feel of this kind of raw light hitting the model, so I've diffused it a little bit. Because this is just our fill light, essentially. Let's move along in the sequence, put this as a solo light, roughly around half power. I've just got a simple strobe with a grid number 2, so narrowing down that beam of light, pointing right into the model's torso because they have that kind of feel in the image. Next thing I'm going to do, put this on a solo also. I've got a beauty dish here, so I want to make a flattering light towards the face. You can see it's catching on the cheekbone, pushing that hard shadow across. You could use a hard light, gone with a beauty dish, so it's going to work quite nicely for me. So beauty dish is just around head height. This beauty dish, I'm almost on full power, but that's because I've got a grid on it. If I took that grid off, it would just spread too far. It would hit the backdrop and just do lots of things, kind of like taking out too much light in the rest of the picture. Then I've got that warming gel. I've got a half CT orange. I don't want to go as far as obviously the amber that I had on the other side, this light, because that would be way too much. That one is coloring like the shadow. This is like cleaning up the image, but it's not too heavy. And then let's put this on a solo light. This is a cool light. Just over half power again, so 6.4, and I've got a half CT blue. On this image here, you can see they've got almost like a speed light feel, like a flash is just hitting across the sand. I think this way of pushing just a bunch of different lighting in makes it not seem too perfect, which is what I like about it. And then also making sure that light is like hitting the legs, shaping that denim. So that's exactly what this light is doing. You can see it as a solo. I could change the angle a little bit, so it's just super low and hitting across the model. So that's our front setup. And then what if we got at the background? I've got full power on here. I've got my area with the barn doors. And again, I'm just raking it across the sand. And it's just pushing across here, giving some texture on the sand. A little exaggerated, just so you can see exactly what it's doing. Dark blue. You wouldn't necessarily have to go that strong. But we're creating difference between the sunset, the sand, and the model. Then I've got my two uplights here. 85% power, 69% power. I could put a little bit brighter on this, but it just depends where it's hitting on my photo printed or painted backdrop. And that's what you're looking at if you look in the far right here. This little kind of like extra light that's clipping. This one is like 80%. I've closed the barn doors down a lot and I'm just pushing it onto the backdrop. So it's this little bleed of light across the background here. I've put these as solo lights. I've got a cool blue on these sky panels over the top. So it's 100%. The light is angled right down and it's just putting this kind of almost like moonlight feel onto the sand. So that with this extra light, the background, it's combining quite nicely, gives that sand that super texture feel. So then with these two sky panels pointing down into the background of the sand, and then these two are pointing into the backdrop. And then I've got just a CT blue, full CT blue on this one and a full CT blue on the other one. And they're 100%. And they're just putting that color into this top corner. Fairly simple. Once you're aware of where you need to go with this, it's easy to see. Nice fill light from our constant lighting, balancing that out the other side with strobe heads. This is our main light that's hitting the model, shaping the face, doing everything we need to do. The model still looks good and beautiful and clean. Then we've got our background lighting. And I've separated them out, just foreground lighting now. Let's look at those side by side. The full combined image. The benefit of looking at it this way is when you have everything on in the background and it's kind of balanced and the color is there, it doesn't make everything look too jarring. Like this highlight down the leg is way too much when the background's off. But when the background is back on and this kind of color toning is here, it all sits together quite nicely. And it's got a similar feel to what we had with our reference image. Obviously, there's things we need to tweak and there's things we'd also do in post-production. The difference I'd say with this is like they don't have this kind of warm edge to it here that I've put into this image. So if that's all straightforward, let's have a look at the next one. Next one is the seated image. So we're going for this one now. The thing I like about this whole shoot is it feels slightly artificial and it feels like they're pinning it in the real world at the same time. You know, it's almost believable. And that's what I like about it. It's like fun and playful. And again, let's have a look what we've got. As usual, I've taken out the things that I don't need. So I'm only using 2 sky funnels at the top. So I've removed them from the rig. Obviously, you wouldn't need to do that. You would just turn them off. But I just don't want it to get confusing for anyone that is. And let's start with them. All I'm doing with these 2 lights here is I'm just kind of dropping a bit of like color and texture onto the sand. You can't really see it as a solo light. Let me see if I can put it as a solo and put it like 100. It might just begin to show up. I don't know how good you will see this in the final YouTube video, but you can see this blue kind of haze that's happening here. You can see it's almost gone, but it does actually like pick up when I turn them both on together. It gives a bit of color to that edge of the sand. I've then got my 2 uplights, which I have a warming gel on. So I've got like an orange on here and orange on this one, and they're just pushing up into the backdrop. So that's giving us a super nice glow, but one is a solo light. Really nice, really feels like sunset. I like it, it's great. Large, long, soft light because they have this big diffusion cap. And then let's look at our side lights. I've toned this more than I would actually suggest to do. So I put like a flame red. You would probably have like a CTO, something that sits in that register of like a heavy sunset feel. But I really wanted to put that flame red so we can see where that light is actually hitting when I take it off the solo. So it stands out just a little bit more. And what you see just across here is it's just picking up in that shadow area and playing off what we've got coming from the other side. And actually, when all the other lights are hitting, this flame red is washed out enough that it kind of fits together with the backdrop quite nicely. Spin around to the other side. Still got the barn doors on, around 80%, full CT blue. We've done this loads of times before, right? We're playing like warm and cold against each other. Clipping the edge of the plant, adding a bit of blue onto that backdrop. I just ramp it up to 100% so you can really see it's hitting the backdrop a lot. It's also hitting the top of those plants. And then it's just catching on the sand dunes. So that's kind of the back row. Also, let me just show you the sand dunes from the side. It looks a bit artificial. That's because all I've done here, taken this sand base layer and just tilted it up instead of warping it. So it's not perfect. In real life, you would just pour loads of sand or you will put it over like some polyfoam or something like that. All right, and then let's look for the front area. Why don't we start with this beauty dish because we're kind of staring at it right now. Let's put this on a solo. So we've got an 8.7. I've got a warming gel, half CT orange. Tone that so it fits with the sunset. Put it on a solo light. It's raking across the body, putting a beautiful light onto the face. Heavy shadow under the jawline and neck, but we're going to knock that back out with some of our front light. Not completely though, because it's bringing the reference image back in. Really strong shadow here. This could be a grid with a reflector. I've gone with beauty dish because it's just nicer for me on the face. Back out. I'm going to put this on a solo light. So this is our constant light on the lantern. This is just really a texture light, a little bit of fill, 100% CT, half CT orange, a little shadow on the leg, just warming up a little bit the body, making it feel like it's not just that one beauty dish coming in, and then it's kind of giving this like last dying feeling of the sun across the sand. Doesn't matter that it's coming from slightly wrong direction because actually when everything is back on, you're going to read it differently. Then let's see what we're punching in with. So we've got another reflector here with a grid number 2, narrowing down that beam of light. And that's just really pushing that strong flashlight feel onto the sand. Again, you'll think it's like super hard, but if you look at the reference image, that's what we've got here. We've got this like pool of light. And this could be like one light, obviously, that's coming down like this, but it's going to be a little bit hard to balance out. So beauty dish and then a grid light would work perfectly. I've gone with a slight warming gel, but I've pushed quite a lot of light into it. So it's almost beginning to kind of blow out the sand. Put it on 10, you'll see what I mean. Way too much. 75 is what we need it for. So let's look from the top again. We've got these 3 lights that are sitting in that same direction. Main light for the face, pushing in with a bit of fill, and then our kind of atmospheric fill. We're just softening everything out from this side. So let's put this on a solo. You can see it's just catching the nose, warming everything up, inside of the leg, making the skin look good, making everything look kind of bronzed, giving that summer feel, full CT orange. And let's compare just the foreground light with no background light, our final image, and then just a foreground light. Some light is hitting the background, and that's fine. We just know that we want to accent some areas, give that sunset feel, give that kind of warm tone that's coming across the sand, give another tone that's coming across on this side, red with a slight blue from here. And actually when they meet in the middle, we're getting those nice, almost purpley end of sunlight feel. And then that beautiful light that we're putting in the sky. Without that, everything again looks way too front lit. So I've got this strong red, like I say, coming from this side. Just be careful, it's kind of warming up that shadow. Maybe you don't want to do that. But again, this is an exaggerated version of things. Or you would just angle if you need to, but it's not affecting anything that's the clothing. And I think this is one of the key messages that you've got to get across. You don't want to be doing loads of post-production in eCom particularly to take any of the color that you've accidentally put into the clothing by bad lighting. So this is all quite clean lighting at the front, slightly warmer sunset feel, but the colors are fairly true, and that's important in eCom to what the customer wants to buy. So this is a more technically challenging one because we've got the two models together, reference image over. There's two variations of this. So there's a big wide landscape shot and there's this shot. I'm just going to go with this shot. We've got this heavy shadow under the model's face. So we've got quite a hard light that's pushing across. Very definite edge to the shadow. We've got some of these kind of specular highlights on the body. And it's picking up like this jeweled vect on the jeans and then also this other model's dress. Highlights on the cheekbone, nose and lips. This heavy shadow of this light that's pushing across the face. And you've got this kind of silhouetted feel. You've got two shadows moving away from the arm, double shadow down here under the leg. Nice highlight on the sand backdrop. And then you've got the backdrop that's lit. Let's look from above. Starting point, row of backlights, a row of top lights. I think everyone will be fairly happy with what we're doing with the backlight. I just show you one of them as a solo. I've got a really strong tinted color on this because it works with my backdrop. So I've got magenta, the uplight, 77%, 68%. So a little bit different. But again, it's just really about where it's hitting on the backdrop. Aries on the side. I've got a blue-green, put it on the solo, raking across the sand at the top, adding that blue into the backdrop. Again, I've exaggerated this feel, bring the reference back over. They've got like just a cooler light. It's not like a deep turquoise, but I've just put it on there so we can see exactly what it's doing. 80%, got the barn doors on, look from above, pushing it across the back of our sand dune. Other light that we're pushing across, put that on a solo. Pink, because I'm just trying to emphasize the feeling of the sunset. And on this side, you can see I'm pushing it across, I'm hitting the opposite direction of the sand dune, so actually when the colors come together, they should sit quite nicely in a frame of reference that works with the backdrop. This light is hitting the backdrop itself. Then let's look at our top row panels. They're pretty much angled down, but this is a solar light. You might just see it creep in, giving just a little bit like of a texture feeling. It's very soft, balancing out those two accent lights that are coming from the side. But when they're all on together, it kind of fits in place. And these are all the same. So I'm like at 75% power. And let's look what we've got at the front. I'm going to start with this side. Notice the change here. I've gone from having my lantern lights and my constant light to actually having a strobe light here. So I've got an umbrella, black silver, and I've got a warming gel on it. Put it as a solo. This is what I meant about those specular highlights. Because I've got a black silver, it's going to pick up that highlight on the skin. Obviously, you can see it kind of all the way down the model's body here. Not a huge amount of light coming in, but it's enough to give that kind of crispy highlight. Not a huge amount above head height, but enough to give us that feeling it's kind of sunlight still. And of course, the sun is a different position to what the sky is telling us, but the way that we read the image, it seems realistic because we're lighting slightly from above. Let's look at our next light to come in here. And this is giving us that hard shadow under the jaw. I've got a reflector on, I've got a grid number 2, and then I've got a slight warming gel, half CT orange. This one was a full CT, so my front light to the face, which is a half CT, just sits it in the same register as everything else, perfectly on my preview image then for giving that body texture, giving that perfect light into the face. Then let's look at our seated model. We'll start with the beauty dish. Beauty dish is doing quite a bit. I don't have a diffusion cap on it, pushing it across the model's face. It's going to give us that shadow under the chin. And also we're getting a lot of light bounce onto a second model, but it's controllable because I'm only at 6.2. Not punching a ton of light into here. I've got the same warming gel as I had on the other model's face light. So any stray light that's hitting that model works quite nicely. Model that we're actually photographing is just over head height and it's angled down. We've got this light that's going to hit onto the ground. This is a solo half CT blue. Again, might look a little bit out of place on its own, but let's just bring in a reference image. And it's this light. We talked about these like double shadows that we've got. I could take the gel off if I wanted to, but I've just put a gel on here to get that kind of balance in the actual virtual simulation. So grid number 3, because all of that would be a little bit harsh and a bit obvious on its own, I've still got my constant lighting from this side. So let's just put this as a solo. You can see already it's on 100% and I've got this strong dark amber. That's just adding that continuity between everything, like the front and the back, between the two models. It's going to give us a little bit of warmth to our shadow. Feels super strong right now, but we know we're knocking most of it back out with the flash. And you can see it sits together. A little warm here, a little warm on the hair. If you were shooting this like real eCom, you probably wouldn't put such a strong color on here. So this, our constant lighting, is kind of just flooding everything across the front of the image. A little bit's hitting the backdrop, but that's fine because we know also we're taking it out with the back row of lights. Let's compare the foreground and then all the lights. Look at those side by side. Final image, foreground image. All that mixed lighting in the background is doing great things for our backdrop. Remember, as I said, this is like too blue, but again, it's there to show you where that light is pushing across. In reality, you'd sit that back. We've got these nice highlights across the model's body. All looks great. I could put a little bit more light onto this model's face if I need to. I could change the angle of that beauty dish reference back in. So this light here, obviously someone's hand holding it and then moving as the model moves. Light's pushing into the model here, whether it's a beauty dish, whether it's a grid reflector. It might be that actually if you're doing a lot of posing, that's being handheld and moved around. More to go. Another double setup. See it from the front. I'll show you the final version from Bershka on this. Let's look at some of those details. Again, we've got that heavy shadow under the jawline. Could be someone holding a grid reflector. Could be like a beauty dish. We've got some contrasty shadows on arms. This is nice. We've got this like crispy highlight that's coming from something at the back. So we're going to push a light across the body. Got a little bit of stray light that's hitting the plants here. It's like cool area at the front of the image. The model's feet go like into a really dark area here, but we're going to put a little bit more light into it. And then we've got this like angular light coming across this model's face, like this nice pale backdrop. And this is what I meant earlier about you not wanting to kind of change a ton of things each time. So I just leap between these two setups. And if we look at it overhead, you'll see like these three lights, I'm pretty much keeping the same feeling in this setup. So I'm lighting from pretty much the same direction. I still got my beauty dish and my grid reflector coming in. I've got my other grid reflector here hitting onto the ground. I want to keep that same language throughout the pictures. I don't want to change it too much. And then I've got my constant lighting that I flip to the other side. Let's start with the backdrop again. I've got three lights on the floor. Got like a little blue gel on them. They're all at 100% and they're all angled up into the backdrop. Put it as a solo. You can see exactly what it's doing on the background. Zoom out to the side. Got a flash here with an octa on it. Because I'm going to use the Arri for something else, I've put a strobe in the background, soft light, no gel or anything on it. I've got an additional accent light as I'm trying to hit those plants at the back, just to give something that kind of grabs the attention. You could do the same thing with like really small LED lights that you put right under the flowers, for example. You could do it a ton of different ways, but all I'm trying to do is add that little bit of texture, which they also have this kind of feeling here. The next thing, flipped my Arri around that's normally hitting the background, pointing it towards the model. So let's just spin around. So it's kind of raking across the sand here, and then it's hitting the models, and it's putting all of that nice accent down the model's legs, which is this, and this little light that's kind of creeping in here. So it's just really about texture. You could use a flash for it. You could use constant lighting. I've got barn doors, Arri. You probably wouldn't use one of the aperture panels for that because it's a little bit too soft and you'd have to have it quite close. You want something with a lot of power that's going to kind of kick through the image. I've got a full CT orange. Depending on skin tone, how much the highlight you want to come forward, you could have less than that. And that's all our background lights. Let's look from the front. So we'll start from this side with our constant lighting. Got it on 30%, really low. Got a little bit of diffusion panel in, full CT orange. This is just our fill light. Bring that reference back in. This is that light that's kind of putting these highlights down here, warming the body up of this model, warming the neck area, evening some of that shadow out because we're predominantly lighting from this side, and again putting a bit of light onto the feet and the legs. I've kept it quite dark like they have in their image, and then a bit of the light is hitting the model's face. Spin around, go one by one. So we'll look at this model's light first. Solo. Grid number one, super tight because I just want to pull the model's face out now. I've got that strong shadow, but we know that we've evened that out with our fill light coming across. Then I've got a beauty dish, this on a solo, mainly doing the seated model, and then a little bit is hitting the model on the background, making sure they're not too separate. Let's look kind of at eye level. This one that's a little bit under this standing model's head height because we're mainly hitting this model down here. And then let's put this on a solo. We know what this is doing now. That's putting that little patch of light onto the ground as if someone's using like a speed light. And I've got a little bit of blue gel. I've almost got it on full power, and then a grid number one, so it's really tight. Let's look at it from above so we can see that again. Predominantly lighting with strobe from this side, and then filling in with this constant light on here. Let's compare them again with just the foreground lights and then the full setup. So the final setup and the foreground. Just with the foreground, everything looks odd. Then we put that background light, everything begins to fit together again. Obviously, you do some like fine adjustments to get this to work nicely, but we've got this kind of slightly overly lit feel to the background. And again, if you think it looks weird, look at the reference image, slightly overly lit here. It's that kind of fake, not fake world that they've created. which feels deliberate. And again, I like it. This doesn't feel like natural sky, so it's easier to see this way. So I've kind of underlit my background a little bit. I could put more power into this backdrop. I don't want to just right now, but it's about getting this light into here. Similar light onto the face, strong shadow, bright light onto the model's face. And then this sort of texture background. And compare that without the background. It looks like a dead, flat image and nothing works. Final setup. It's this one. This is a little tricky to get the posing accurate on this, but I've kind of got something that's okay. Again, things to look at. There's actually quite a bit of color tone that's coming into the sand. You'll see that there's like a warm tone and then a cool tone that's pushing across. Then this angled light that's raking across the model's face. See like super bright highlight here. So we can see the light is pretty close. And then we want to add light back into the body. I'm going to start with the background again. So let's start with the background because I think it's interesting. I've got all these sky panels, 75% pretty much. I've got pink across all of them. Put it on a solo, you're not really going to see anything on the sand, but when I put them all back on together, you'll get a little hint of color across the sand, add that kind of texture. So I'm kind of pushing forward a little bit. I'm not directly down. I'm pushing forward. You can see just like this little pink that's coming across there. So that's coming from our top-down light. Let's look at this side now. Ignore this light. It's not doing anything. I just didn't delete it from the setup. Let's look at our ARI. I've got a pink that I'm pushing across the sand. So again, I'm trying to kind of tone it, get that tonal register that works with that top-down lights with all the sky panels. In the preview image, you can see it's just pushing this kind of feeling of texture. It's not changing the product color too much, and I can knock that color out. This is really about adding warmth, adding a slight hint of sunset feel. Put my other ARI on a solo. I'm putting that cool tone into the sand. You can just see it creeping in here. So it's just about getting that like balance between them. This one, again, I've toned it a lot more than I normally would do just to show you what it's doing. So put this as a solo. This is just giving a hint of color into the image. I'll put it on full power so you can see exactly where it is, right? Creepy uplight. When I put it with this marine blue at 60% and just adding again this sort of feeling of texture, this like dappled light that's coming across the sand. It's going to color the shadow a little bit. It's not going to color what the model's wearing because it's like this black swimsuit, so I'm fine. I know I'm going to take everything out with the side lights. So let's go with the beauty dish first. 70%, quite far away, angled up quite high, warming jowl, half CT orange, classic fill light, picking up just enough. And then I've put on my constant lighting, full CT orange, 45%. This is completely open. That's a good point to mention, I think, with this. I don't have a diffusion panel, so I get those specular highlights because I don't have that diffusion panel on the front. And then to knock everything back and give that kind of crispy highlight that we know is going into the model's face, I've just got a simple reflector with a grid on. Grid number 3, I'll put it as a grid number 1. See in the preview image, it shuts everything down quite a bit. Let's open it up as grid number 4, floods everything across the frame. So 3 is fine. It's hot, highlight on the model's head, but I bring that reference back in. And it's just at the edge of that kind of highlight burning out. I could change the angle a little bit, but again, with this, the simulation is quite hard to get the hand and the shadow in the right place. Spin around so we can see where we are. This light's pushing across, just giving that nice textural feeling onto the model. And let's compare it with the foreground. So final light and then the foreground light. And this is where I think those subtle changes become kind of interesting because this gives this slight feeling of like almost like moonlight that's coming across the sand from this direction. This is like that waning kind of sunlight, sunset feel that's coming across from this direction because I'm playing those two colors off against each other. Without that, that texture becomes quite flat and quite boring. You can see I'm just picking up a little bit of kind of pinks in the shadows. Bring the reference image back over. This could be done in post-production, right? You could just put a gradient filter across here and just give a kind of blue turquoise feel in the sand. But I'm just putting a little bit of that accent color into the sand myself. And I'll just show you that again. So I'm going to put this back on a solo light. And this is that pink that I was talking about, that like waning sunset feel raking across the sand. And then obviously I was taking it out with that blue kind of turquoise that's coming from the other side. Look at them again side by side, and then it becomes really obvious what we've done. Hints of pink, hints of blue. So we've got a set that we can work with. We know that we can work with a bunch of constant lights that are soft diffuse panels. We can work with constant lights that are hard, that are kind of accent lights. We can work with lighting our backdrop. And then we can work with pushing our front light in with a mixed strobe light from one side, constant light from the other. Quite a few different setups that hopefully still have a cohesive feel. It feels like it's all tied together and that you could work with that in your stage when you walk into that set area. So then we've achieved quite a lot. We've got a real combination of things. We've got a strong sunset. We've got that feeling that, you know, the sunlight is almost leaving us and you've got 5 minutes to shoot something and get that perfect feeling. But then you've got a feeling that I'm hitting the model with front flash and then I've got this sunset behind creeping over the dunes. This slightly more artificial feel, and then this kind of nighttime shot that we're pushing the flash in with. A lot of range, a lot of things that we can really play with, and just showing you how much you can control with a few lights and a backdrop. I'm going to go back to our base layer for our kind of final recap. And this is pretty much everything we use, right? So we've got 4 lights across the back. We sometimes used a couple of lights down here. And then we've got these background accent lights, and then we've got our foreground lights. If you're relatively new to this, then it might seem like super intimidating to walk into that environment. But actually now you can hopefully see, okay, this is what I'm trying to control, and this is what I'm doing with it. I don't need loads of flags and polyboards invading my set area. And the reason that that's really important also is the video team have to also come in and shoot video, models dancing and so on. And you can't have loads of flags everywhere. You're constantly having to like rake the sand and brush the sand and take away all those footprints and things. And you don't want to put lots of stands, for example, on your set. But actually by controlling our foreground and our background, using grids, using quite tight lights from the front, we can get a really controlled feeling. And all we've had to do with that is just swap the background out once. We didn't really move anything from the lighting rig. We just changed the angle, and we didn't really invade the space too much. We just had maybe someone hand holding a light at the front when we needed to. And it's a super fast, economical way of shooting if you're shooting eCom. And consider the difference if you've got to go and do all these setups at the beach. That's a lot of hard work to do. So hopefully it's useful to everyone. Thanks for watching as always.